You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Episode 68, The Paradox.
Welcome to The Paradox with your attending, Dr. Eric Larson. He is a practicing anesthesiologist and clinical assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Listen in as he takes you behind the scenes of what practicing medicine in today's ever-changing world is like with another doctor. The Paradox is a fun and accidentally informative show for physicians, patients, or anyone who has ever found themselves in a waiting room.
Welcome to The Paradox. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Larson. Thanks for joining me as we explore the U.S. medical system in a fun and informative format through expert analysis. Today's expert is Dr. Rudrani Banik, a neuro-ophthalmologist in New York City. Dr. Banik is a board-certified ophthalmologist, fellowship-trained in neuro-ophthalmology, and functional medicine expert. She graduated from Brown University, did her internal medicine training at Mount Sinai in Miami, before her specialty training at UC Irvine and fellowship training at Johns Hopkins. After working as an academician at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx and New York Eye and Ear Infirmary of Mount Sinai, she began a private practice called Envision Health NYC, although she still does teaching and research. I think you'll find her journey to private practice as interesting as I did. How she set up her medical practice to treat patients and why she chose not to accept insurance. And how does a specialist drive referrals? How do you find a niche in a city with the highest concentration of ophthalmologists in the country? I'll tell you all about that in the interview, as well as talking a little bit about migraine treatment. Additionally, I think it's very important that I tell you what the fovea is. So it's a little bit strange, but the fovea is a spot in your retina, the back of your eye that receives light signals, and is where the concentration of receptors is highest and gives us our best vision. Anyway, it's important that you know what it is for a fantastic joke I tell in the middle of the interview. Well, I thought it was funny. Show notes, including links to Dr. Banik's Facebook groups, Instagram account, YouTube, can be found at theparadox.com/068. You can find her practice at rudranibanikmd.com. That's rudranibanikmd.com. Thanks again for the listen and for allowing me to do last week's emergency podcast on some bad pending legislation in Michigan concerning surprise billing. It's been helpful to people here in Michigan, so thanks for allowing me the indulgence of interrupting your Paradox feed. Now we're back to the regular Paradox feed and the usual episode numbering. So for your patience, today you can enjoy my discussion with Dr. Rudrani Banik. An ophthalmologist sees the light. Enjoy. Well, thank you so much. I'm here with my new friend, Dr. Rudrani Banik, a neuro-ophthalmologist in New York. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Larson. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Well, I was drawn to you because you have a very interesting practice. Why don't you talk about what your practice is in New York, in the big city, and I guess just sort of the evolution of how you got to where you are and the way you're practicing.
Sure. So I guess I'll go back to my field, which is I trained in ophthalmology first, and then I did a fellowship in neuro-ophthalmology. So it's not a very common subspecialty, but it's a very necessary subspecialty. And straight out of fellowship, I was kind of groomed to take an academic position. My mentor was very much an academician, and he kind of said, well, this is what you should do. So I listened to him and I said, okay, I'll find myself an academic job. So I got a faculty position at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. And I was there for several years. And then subsequently, I became a program director, still in academics. I was still doing ophthalmology, neuro-ophthalmology. And then I got a position at New York Eye and Ear Infirmary. And again, I was doing a combination of things. So I was seeing patients, I was teaching quite a bit, and I was doing clinical trials in neuro-ophthalmology. And basically, I envisioned myself staying in academics for the rest of my career. I really didn't think that there was any reason to change or to leave because I was quite happy in my position, and I thought I would stay there till I retired. But things changed along the way, and this was about, I would say about 2016, when there were some changes going on within the department. My hospital had merged with a much larger organization, and there were changes coming down the pipeline that I wasn't necessarily interested in participating in. And around the same time, I also started to have some health issues. And so I had migraines pretty much my whole adult life, but my migraines were very, very severe at that time. And it turned out that I was pretty much having a migraine every single day because of stress and poor diet and lifestyle. So I was going to work with a migraine every day, plus all these changes are happening at work in terms of administration and leadership. And at that point, I decided I needed to kind of make a change in myself and my career. So I really discovered around that time functional medicine. And I don't know if many of your listeners are familiar with functional medicine, because I certainly was not before I'd heard, before 2016. I never even heard of the term, had no clue what it was. But basically, it's a way of looking at health, basically chronic disease, and trying to get to the root cause. So not just making a diagnosis and prescribing a medication and putting a Band-Aid on it, but really trying to fix the problem at its core and addressing it that way. Mm-hmm. So I became really intrigued by functional medicine. I used some of the principles to fix my own issues. So I began to make major changes in my nutrition, which I think was really the root cause of my migraine. I had a horrible diet, and I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't sleeping properly, wasn't eating meals on time. There's so many things I was doing not right. I was also having lots of caffeine. So I think functional medicine really improved my own issues. And around the same time, when things were going on at work, I was thinking, well, I think I want to incorporate functional medicine more into my practice, not just for my own health, but for my patients. The limitation of functional medicine is that it takes quite a bit of time to address patients' issues. And many times patients have multiple issues. So it can't be handled within just a 10 or 15-minute visit. Oftentimes visits are an hour or two, or perhaps even longer, especially a neuro-ophthalmic visit. So I made the big leap, and I decided to leave my position in academics, and I decided to venture out and open up a private practice so I could practice functional medicine in the way I thought was best for my patients. So long story short, that's kind of how I came to becoming getting into private practice and also pursuing functional medicine.
I've never heard a story about a physician who doesn't eat well, has lots of caffeine, and doesn't sleep. That might describe everybody in medicine. Right? So, and it's funny.
Well, I was as an extreme. I was really at an extreme. I mean, I was having like 8 to 12 cups of caffeinated beverages a day and just sleeping 4 hours a night. I mean, I was really in bad shape. So
wow.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, this is a story you hear all the time. It's certainly people say, well, once I'm done with training, I'll kind of go back to being healthy again. And, once habits form, they're tough to break, right? I mean, I think that's probably the biggest challenge when it comes to functional medicine, or sort of basically you're just changing someone's lifestyle entirely, right? And saying we're going to try and figure out what's going on, and then we have to fix your habits. How do you go about that with patients? Is the hardest part convincing that there's a problem, or that you kind of guessing what the problem is, or how do you sort of work that investigative sort of detective work?
I think I actually have how should I put this? A benefit in that because I'm in private practice, patients actually seek me out. And what's happened is that they've gone to other doctors, perhaps other ophthalmologists and neuro-ophthalmologists, and they have not gotten better. They still have the same symptoms. They're not feeling better. They're not seeing better, or they're still getting headaches. And so they've failed other treatment regimens, and they are looking for a better way to approach their problem. And so when they come to see me, they're already in the mindset where I need to fix this, and I need to find a doctor who's going to guide me to fixing this. So I think emotionally, spiritually, they're already in terms of that. There has to be a team effort in terms of fixing that root cause. And, many of these patients are willing to make major changes, whether it's their diet or certain lifestyle patterns that they have, their sleep schedule, their travel schedule, their work schedule, whatever it is. Many patients have gotten to the point where they just can't go on the way that they've been doing. So I think I'm at an advantage in that situation because patients are already primed to come to see me. There are still challenges. I mentioned, as you mentioned, diet is so difficult to change and to break those habits. what someone's eating actually, but also meal timing is also very important. And of course, portion size. So it's very difficult to modify that unless someone is 100% in and they want to do it with you.
Do you find that a lot of problems are related to dietary? I mean, I think there's more research coming out that there's the inflammatory effects of simple sugars and things like that I think we weren't well appreciated in medicine, and that the potential influence it has on disease processes. So do you have to use the science? I mean, I guess you said you have people are sort of willing, but do you use the science to try and find the root cause a little bit faster? Or how is someone comes in, let's say with migraines, maybe just an example. Someone comes in with migraines, they've had it like you did. How do you go about figuring out what's going on and how to fix it?
So, I first do an intake, which is quite extensive. So I ask them about their habits. How much, what are they eating? How much are they eating? And all the other things. And also I ask about stress levels. And for many patients, what it comes down to, honestly, is just reducing their stress levels, specifically for migraine, but perhaps for other conditions, other inflammatory conditions, it's much more than that. And one thing I've kind of learned in my functional medicine training is that many conditions are very closely tied to gut health. So it may not just be inflammatory foods, but it could also be disturbances in the microbiome or what they call gut dysbiosis. And so I do really address that quite a bit in terms of what's going on in their GI system, because it may sound a little odd, but I really do believe that there is a gut-eye connection. I know many people have maybe heard of a gut-brain connection or definitely gut-immune connection, but there is such a thing, I think, as a gut-eye connection. And I think that there are certain, bacterial kind of strains which may be impacting which may be affecting their neurotransmitters, affecting their immune system, kind of triggering or allowing the chronic inflammation that's leading to their issue. So it does require some detective work. I practice in New York. I am very limited in terms of testing that I can do. I happen to live in a state where I'm very limited in terms of I can't order a comprehensive stool analysis to see exactly which microbial species are in the gut. I'm not really permitted to do that. I'm not really permitted to do food sensitivity testing. So I'm limited in my testing. So I really base a lot of my diagnosis and treatment decisions based off of clinical history, really.
Wow. Now, when you say you're limited by testing, is that the testing exists, but by specialty, you're not allowed to test for those things?
In New York State, certain tests are disallowed at a state level. And so if you wanted to, for example, order a specific test which is not within the limits of what New York State allows, you'd have to get a special permission from Albany, basically. So it's a very interesting situation. I don't know how many other states are in this in this conundrum, because it is really a conundrum. I'm not able to freely order what I think the patient may need, and it's actually sometimes quite difficult for patients, and I end up sometimes having to send them to neighboring states. So I will send them to either New Jersey or even Connecticut just to get the testing done. And it's mind-boggling that I can't order in my own state. I wish I actually had licenses in those states. Maybe I should get licenses in those states so I can order the testing myself. But it's a tricky situation, and it's not by specialty. Interestingly, it's an across the board rule or law, I guess.
So someone just decided we're not going to allow this certain test to be performed in the state of New York for some reason. That seems very. I mean,
yes.
All the states are weird. I mean, in the sense that there's a uniqueness to every state and sort of their laws, and whether it comes to certificate of need but this is a new sort of thing. I've never heard of this before, so that's very interesting.
Lab requisition forms, they'll actually have, they'll list all the tests that they offer, and they'll put a little asterisk right next to there, and then on the bottom they'll say not available in New York State. It's quite interesting.
So I've got 3 people at my house who deal with migraines, and sometimes pretty bad. And there's one's a senior in high school, and others in 8th grade, and then my wife's had them since she was 3. And there are always some triggers that are obvious and others that are not quite so much. I know you have, I think you've got a large selection of ebooks that you have published or have available on your website, and one of them is on migraines. Can you sort of walk through what's in the ebook and sort of what kind of information someone might gather from there? That'd be helpful.
Sure. So an ebook, it's a short volume. It's not a very extensive text. It's usually something in the order of anywhere from 10 to 50 or 75 pages. And so I have a few ebooks on my website. The one on migraine, it's titled 6 Natural Ways to Improve Your Headaches, Stop Suffering and Start Living.
Yeah.
And so basically I go through what some of the dietary interventions are. And it's not the full dietary intervention, but it's basically I usually start patients on what's called an elimination diet, which is a mainstay of functional medicine. And an elimination diet is basically removing all the pro-inflammatory foods. So it does include gluten and dairy, as well as some nightshade vegetables, occasionally soy as well. And these are thought to be pro-inflammatory within the gut and can have immune kind of consequences. So the elimination diet is something that I recommend for 3 weeks. And so many patients are removing many food groups from their diet during this phase, but what I ask them to replace it with is very, very important. So I ask them to replace it with 12 therapeutic foods. And there's a whole list of them. They're in the ebook. I believe they're in the ebook. But basically, I really try to promote a plant-rich diet. So I'm not saying plant-based diet, but a plant-rich diet. And I usually say, take out all those foods and replace it with 5 cups of vegetables a day. And there are some vegetables which are perhaps better than others. And I think by doing the diet, it may not be that that they benefit because they're not eating all those pro-inflammatory foods. It may just be that they benefit because their blood sugar levels are better controlled. They're not having highs and lows, or they're not having as much just simple sugars. They're not having as much salt. They're not having as much caffeine or red wine, whatever it is. I find that it's very effective. The other thing that's really critical for migraine is just hydration status. So something very, very basic that many people don't even really consider in terms of migraine prevention, but it's so important to stay hydrated. I can't tell you how many times I've heard patients who develop migraine auras because they're working out at the gym and they're dehydrated, or it's a really hot, humid day and they just haven't had enough fluids and they develop aura and then migraine. So it's just something really important to maintain is hydration status. Caffeine is very important. I had mentioned this before as well. Caffeine, it's a double-edged sword with migraine. Sometimes people need a certain amount of caffeine to prevent migraines, but having too much is not good either. So I usually try to get patients to reduce their caffeine levels down to 8 ounces a day or less of a caffeinated beverage. Sometimes it's difficult, but with time, hopefully they can get there. And then the stress reduction part is really important. There's so many different stressors in our lives. We all have stress. It's an inevitable part of living, but it's really how we respond to that stress that's important. So, whether it means doing meditation or listening to music or doing some form of exercise or just spending time with friends or family, whatever, the method is, that the person finds would be most helpful is what I recommend. So it does require a little bit of kind of coaxing of patients, so what do you enjoy? Maybe you can incorporate some of these things more into your life, and hopefully, their situation gets better with time.
Yeah.
So those are the mainstays of the migraine regimen. But I also use quite a few supplements for migraine that actually have been clinically proven to reduce the frequency and severity of headaches. So my magnesium is one of the really most beneficial mineral supplements that I found. And there are different formulations of magnesium I find to be more effective for migraine. So the chelated forms that are the amino acid chelated forms, such as magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate. Riboflavin has also been shown at high doses to help with migraines. So riboflavin, B2, 400 milligrams a day. In my regimens, I also sometimes use essential oils. So it's really a departure from the traditional medical school kind of teaching of how do you treat migraine. The traditional medical approach is typically, okay, you take this prescription and eventually your headaches will get better.
Right.
And, it's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. It doesn't really solve what's really going on. So,
yeah, I mean, I think especially when it comes to migraines, more than something like hypertension is almost like a baseline sort of condition that people have. I mean, there are certainly ways and dietary things you can do, and losing weight, and exercising more, but for the most part, it feels like migraines. There's definitely more. It definitely feels more like a triggering phenomena. That there are all sorts of different things that factor into whether you have one or don't, or the severity of it, and how long it lasts. But I want to switch gears a little bit now to talk a little bit more about your practice, because I'm always intrigued on how people, change paths, and then how they figure out what they're supposed to do. Because I think it seems obvious to people who are on the outside, like, well, of course you would, set up your practice this way. But when you decided to leave academics, I mean, academics, and this is my impression as someone who's always been in private practice, but you train at an academic center. The academic schedule is fairly regimented. It's fairly predictable as far as sort of what your expectations are, and sort of how things are, and everything's kind of sort of built for you. There's not a lot that you have to set up for the most part. But it's totally different for private practice. I mean, you have to be very intentional about how you're going to go about creating a practice, and sort of how you're going to model it and get the revenues and those sorts of things. How did you sort of figure all that stuff out when you decided to leave the academic world?
So I was scared to death, actually.
Yeah, that's honestly, universal,
because,
I've heard.
Yeah, and it's just I just never pictured myself being the owner of a small business. And that's really what it is. It's running a business. And I had no business background. My husband's in finance, but he didn't really actually help me that much, honestly. I kind of just figured things out by trial and error. And I figured, there are plenty of people out there in private practice. If they can do it, I can do it too. I just have to kind of figure out what's going to work for me. So, I learned how to do all the back end stuff. So, I had to find an EMR. I had to find a payroll provider. I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to find my staff? How am I going to have one staff member choose? I have a small practice, a solo practice. How many staff members do I really need? What are my hours going to be like? Because yes, I was in private practice, but I still wanted to maintain that the academic affiliation. So I was not full. I did not start off full time in private practice. I was doing it part time. So how was that going to work? And then the other side of it is, how would I get referrals? Because when I chose to go into private practice, I also decided to no longer participate with any insurances, and this is a really major step for me. I did not want to have my previous patients feel as though I was just leaving and kind of leaving them in the lurch without any follow-up care. But I decided to go fee for service, so cash only, primarily because I did not want to deal with all the billing right. headaches and potentially get audited, because I was using, in terms of the coding, the CPT codes, I was using high-level codes for most of my visits because they are quite complex, especially in neuro-ophthalmology, and I did not want to get audited. And if I spend an hour or two with the patient, I also wanted to make sure that I got reimbursed appropriately. Getting $35 for spending 45 minutes with a patient was not going to work in private practice. So I guess because of all these reasons combined, I chose to leave the insurance model. And it was a big step. I really honestly did not know how it was going to go. And what I told myself was, I will give this a limited amount of time to see if it's successful, if it's going to work or not. And I kind of said loosely, anywhere from 3 to 5 years, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back to academics. There's always that fallback option. Mm-hmm. So I think that was kind of me a little bit of
some comfort. You were able to sleep at night because of that.
Yeah, some comfort. I had something to fall back on, some reassurance that, okay, I'll still find a job even if this doesn't work. But I have to say, having been out in private practice now for over 3 years, I would never go back. Never. Because, yes, there are small headaches in terms of running a business. Sometimes there's staffing issues or other issues that I previously did not necessarily have to deal with. But having the flexibility to do what I want to do, to practice the way I want to practice the way I wish I would like my patients to get that kind of service, I don't think I could go back at this point. And it's not just the functional medicine component. I think overall, even if I went back to practicing straight ophthalmology, not even neuro-ophthalmology, I don't think I could go back. And then there's that other side of it, is the flexibility in terms of the hours. Mm-hmm. I can choose to work as little or as much as I want. I can take off for vacation whenever I want. So my daughter is still young. And, this past summer, I decided, hey, I'm going to take off 3 weeks. I'm going to take her to Asia, take her on a trip, because pretty soon she's going to be older and she's not going to want to go with mom and dad. So, if I were still an employee of a large hospital organization, I would not be able to just take off 3 weeks like that and go on a family trip. So there are definitely pluses and minuses.
Yeah. I mean, everything's got trade-offs. That's all. That's what we learn in medicine. That's like the first thing, right? the trade-offs with anything. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when I talk to the physicians who either direct primary care, or I guess a lot of them who are specialists who are in the insurance-free sort of model, they consider themselves direct care, which is similar to direct primary care, but it's obviously not primary care, but just that it's a fee for service, cash base, and it just provides that flexibility. The challenges, of course, is always the other things, like you mentioned. What are you going to be able to have enough patients to keep the lights on? Can you stay busy enough, and can you charge enough? And are there people who are going to pay for that service, right?
In New York City, in my field in ophthalmology, in New York City, in the zip code that I'm in, has the highest density of ophthalmologists in the country. So it seems like there's an ophthalmologist in every block almost, or two sometimes.
So it's like you're in like the phobia
of ophthalmology. So that was also a challenge, is, how would I get patients? And what I've learned is that, initially the first couple of months when I started in private practice, I would actually go and knock on people's doors and say, hey, I'm here. I'm around the corner from you. I do this and this and this. I provide these services. I'd be happy to help you out with any patients that you need. And the response I got was really shocking. The response I got was, well, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, but, the physicians I saw in my neighborhood, they were set in their referral patterns, and they would not be willing to refer outside of their referral patterns. So it's kind of an interesting situation. So I was a little bit discouraged, but then what I realized is that in this day and age, so many patients are on the internet, and even, the whole range. So even elderly patients, I have 70 or 80-year-old patients who find me because they Google, and they find me that way. And I realized, no, I don't need to get referrals. I don't need to go knocking on people's doors and get referrals from my colleagues. I can actually just put myself out there into the world of the internet, into the web, and, create content that people would appreciate, and I can get patients that way. So I've done quite a bit on social media, kind of just providing educational content, and I think people find me that way. And so it's a completely different way of generating revenue, of developing a practice and a brand that I don't think I ever would have even known had I not left academics, because it never even crossed my mind, I should be doing these things. I should be out there on social media. I should be creating videos. I should be doing ebooks and things like that. So it's just completely changed my perspective, and all in a good way.
Yeah, that's real interesting. And I think most physicians, that's probably safe to say, like you mentioned yourself, don't ever think about branding. And they don't think about sort of, producing content and sort of things to drive eyeballs to, no pun intended, to them and their practice, right?
No pun intended.
So, when you've learned it, did you learn about this, or do you say, I tend to fall on pages with people with ebooks or with video content? Is that what sort of got you the idea? Did you talk to someone? How did you sort of stumble upon this plan to, drive traffic to you from the web?
So a couple of different ways. So number one, I am part of a functional medicine community. It's a very large community. So not just physicians, but there are nutritionists, there are PAs, nurse practitioners, chiropractors, naturopaths, men, and even PhDs who are in the functional medicine world, who are providers in some way or form. And so they've really nailed it down. They know how to work social media. and how to generate momentum for their practice or their brand or the service that they're offering. So again, not everyone in the functional medicine world is an MD. And so I learned a lot from them and watching them and kind of seeing their successes, how they've navigated the space. The other thing that really opened my eyes was when I began to put together my website. And this is something that was just, completely a different world to me. I had no idea, what does a website have to have? What are all these terms, call to action, lead magnet, SEO? I mean, all these terms I'd never heard of before because I never had to learn about them before. So I began to work with a web developer who actually had worked with other functional medicine practitioners. And so in working with that, him and his team, I learned so much about how do you market yourself on social media? How do you market yourself on Google? How can you draft a perfectly worded Google ad, for example? And I never knew any of this before. So I'm just so happy that I did this, not just because of the satisfaction from, the practice standpoint, but just from a personal growth standpoint is to learn how to do all this and, kind of take it to the next level. And it took quite some time. I mean, this is not something I learned overnight. I would say that it took me probably a year and a half to even get my website up and running the way that I wanted it to look and the way that I wanted it to function. So it's quite a time investment as well, but it's totally doable. And even with someone with no experience whatsoever in designing a website, if you ask me right now to put together a website, I probably could do it on my own. So it's a steep learning curve, but totally doable.
And the ebooks that you've written, I mean, how hard is it to do an ebook?
It is so easy. It is incredibly easy. So the first thing is that you have to find a topic, a relatively small topic that you think your patients would, or your potential patients would want to hear about. And so oftentimes there are certain kind of catchwords in the title that will draw people in. So for example, 6 ways to lose weight, or the 10 things that you should know about sleep hygiene, or whatever it is. So you have to find a catchy title, and then basically in the ebook, basically the first kind of chapter or the introduction should be, okay, what is the problem that someone may be having, and how can you, as the physician or the provider or expert in this area, provide them with information to help them with their problem. So I think you basically have to draw people into your ebook first, and then write a very brief ebook. It should be something brief, because people's attention spans are really not that long. In the age of social media where people are scrolling through, tens of hundreds of posts in just a few minutes, you really want to just create something short, digestible, that people can really benefit from. So, I wouldn't make it too long. So most of my ebooks are fairly short. I would say 20 pages or less. But again, you can do something a little bit longer. Also intersperse it with plenty of interesting illustrations or diagrams or infographics. People love infographics. And then at the end, have a call to action, which is basically what is the next step the person should be taking after reading your ebook. So maybe it's calling your practice for an appointment, or maybe it's doing a phone consult with you, or a telemedicine consult with you, or maybe it's purchasing a product that you've developed or you would like to promote. So there should be always a call to action at the end to get them to engage further with you. Or maybe it's something like follow me on social media, join my Facebook group, or follow me on Instagram or Twitter or YouTube, watch my video. So there should be the next step that patients or whoever's reading it will be invited to take.
It certainly seems like when I see most of the ebooks that are offered, there's almost never a charge for them, because I don't think anyone would actually purchase one. But it seems like one of the primary functions of them is to gather email addresses and contact information so that you can reach out to these people who had some initial interest, at least in some of your products, to then come back or to offer them other things maybe in the future, right? I mean, that's one of the primary functions of the ebook. That's a free giveaway.
Yes, and then as you're completely right. So in most cases, it's completely free of charge, and the purpose for most ebooks is to gather emails and to create an email list. Now that's a whole different, aspect of it is how do you manage that email list and what do you do with that email list? But it's to kind of, create a repository of names of people who may want to do business with you or may want to come see you in the future.
What can you explain to what your daily practice looks like? I mean, are you, assuming this is like a regular work day, are you seeing patients, all new patients? Are they chronic patients? Are your patients paying like a membership fee, or is it just always a per visit fee that you charge?
So I have a fee structure, which is basically, it's very straightforward. It's a flat fee. So there's a certain fee for every new patient, and there's a separate fee for every established patient. Occasionally, I do offer discounts. If it's someone with Medicare who really needs to see me or who I've seen before, I went into private practice, I will offer them a discounted rate, or a Medicaid patient, for example, that I know very well, I will offer a discounted rate. And I wish I could do a membership model, but in ophthalmology, it's quite difficult to do a membership model. So I think that is probably more amenable to primary care providers. But I have many colleagues who do membership models, and it works wonderfully for them. So it is something that works quite well. And then so basically, I have in my practice, I see probably the maximum would be about 15 patients a day. And I have new patient slots, which are 1 hour, though even in most cases, the appointment is much longer than 1 hour because there's testing involved as well. But usually the face-to-face time with me is anywhere from 45 minutes to 1 hour. Established patients are half an hour slots. And that also, it's usually more than that the patient is actually in the office because they're getting testing done. And then, so I do schedule patients. I try to squeeze in as many patients in one day as possible because I actually have decreased my time in private practice because my research responsibilities had kind of geared up over the past 6 months to 1 year. So temporarily, I actually cut down on my private practice time. So I was seeing patients about 2.5 days a week. And now I'm only seeing patients 1 or 1.5 days a week. So it's significantly limited compared to what I was doing before. And again, it's because of the research component right now. And it's definitely a balance between everything. So I felt as though in order to still provide the same quality of care, I didn't want to compromise that by trying to see too many patients in 1 week.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the nice thing about it, whether you're changing your fee structure or your hours, you can flex up and down because you are your own boss. And so obviously you have the ability to do what you want. The last question I had is about referral patterns. And one of the things that I know I've talked to other docs who've decided to go out on their own or their fear is, today's day and age, most physicians, especially primary care physicians, are in some sort of network. They're either within a hospital system. And so the referral pattern generally is, I guess you can't say dictated because that'd be against the law, but for the most part, we all know that it actually is, it is like you have to stay within the network, right? You have to, otherwise it's called leakage, or there's some other term where you suddenly are not sending your patients to the orthopedic surgeon within your group, or the neurologist, or whoever it might be, the specialist. Do you find that patients are just, because I think, ultimately patients have the choice. They can say, well, I really don't want to, I want to leave this, this medical group or whatever, and I want to go outside to see so-and-so. Is that where you're getting your patients, that people are just still telling the primary care docs, I'm just more interested in going to see Dr. Banik because I think she might be able to treat me better than the neurologist you're going to send me to?
Absolutely. I think patients are advocating for themselves when it comes to going out of network or, seeking a fee-for-service provider. And as I was mentioning before, I am usually not the first ophthalmologist or neuro-ophthalmologist they've seen. I'm usually the second or third or sometimes even the fourth because they're just not happy with their care elsewhere. So they're looking for a solution. And the other thing that they're looking for is, I think they're looking for someone to really just listen to them. And because I do have the time, I have the luxury of the time to listen to them. My visits are not rushed because I'm not in a system where I have to generate a certain number of RVUs, within a certain time frame. I can spend that time. So I think patients, that's why they're willing to invest that money because they realize the value of the care and the type of service that I provide. And again, it's a choice that the patient ultimately makes. And regardless of what their primary caregiver or their gatekeeper, whatever you want to term it, that provider is saying, many patients will seek me out. And oftentimes, I definitely communicate back with either the primary or whoever, had referred the patient or any other caregivers within the patient's team. And I think they really appreciate the feedback and the notes that I write, because they're quite extensive. So I think, if a patient does decide to go out of network or with a provider who's not traditional within their circle, their provider circle, it's still important to stay within the team and really to engage with the other providers. So I think it's something that's really critical for if someone's considering doing this, to take that step and go outside of the traditional healthcare system. That's something that they really should keep in mind. Very important.
Finally, looking back to when you were practicing, say 5 years ago, how much better do you think you are now as a clinician and as a doctor than you were back then? So
I think, every patient I see makes me a better doctor, actually.
Sure.
The more experience that I have, dealing with various manifestations of the same condition. So, we talked about migraine before. There are so many manifestations of migraine. Yes, there's the typical migraine with aura, but there's so many other things people can have. And the more I listen to patients, I'm learning more about how it's affected their life, how, what specific types of symptoms they have. I think my clinical acumen has improved, but also my people skills have improved significantly. I provide them with, it's really a team approach. I collaborate with the patient for their care. I advocate for them. So I think that's something that has developed in a way that I would not have been able to do in my previous position in academics, because I can really go deep and I get very, very close to my patients. So I think overall, my relationships with patients are just so much stronger and closer knit. And, many times they'll come and ask me questions that are beyond my realm of expertise. I had patients who ask me, Dr. Banik, I'm going to get this dental procedure done. What kind of anesthesia should I have? And, I just say, well, I don't know. Go ask your dentist. But I feel, privileged in a way, because they're asking me because they trust me. And they trust me in a way that, they trust my opinion beyond what I already can provide for them. So I really cherish that, that kind of relationship. And so, again, it's just made me a better physician all around, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I repeat this mantra probably every other show, which probably drives listeners a little crazy, but 80% of physicians, the number one reason that they get professional satisfaction in the job is the relationship they have with the patients. And this just shows you that you can actually be a specialist and get to know people and actually provide and establish that relationship. To all those who are primary care and think you're the only ones who have relationships with patients, it's not true. I can, even as someone who does see someone for a couple of minutes doing anesthesia. Well, it's been a delightful discussion. Thank you so much for being on with me. If people want to find out more about you and what you're doing and what you're writing and all the ebooks and things, is your website the best place to go?
Absolutely. So please visit my website. There's a contact me page. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, or you can just email me. Actually, I'm very open to receiving emails. And if anyone has any questions about anything we've talked about, I'd be happy to answer and help out. If you need advice about social media, I'd be happy to do that. Very, very happy to share what I've learned over the past 3 years, which has really, tremendously changed my life and made it so much better in so many ways. So, but thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed being on your show, Dr. Larson. It's really been a lot of fun, actually, talking about these topics.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been a great time. Thanks again, Dr. Banik, and have a great evening.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Paradox. If you like what the doc is doing, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And share the show with your friends. Become a supporting listener to get access to special bonuses at patreon.com/theparadox. Show notes can be found at theparadox.com.